Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Master Series, your guide to intelligent production, brought to you by Entertainment Partners. I'm your host, Natalie Nelson. In the Master Series, we focus on important issues impacting the entertainment industry and its workers through in-depth discussions with legal, tax, payroll, technology, and production experts. And in celebration of Women's History Month, today's panel is Women in Animation, a 3D View, and we will be joined by a distinguished group of leaders from across the industry to share their insights, experiences, and even some advice. Two quick housekeeping items as we get started today. First is that we encourage you to post questions for the panelists using the Q&A section of the Zoom call. You can do so by clicking the Q&A icon you should see in the Zoom navigation menu, and we'll do our best to save time after our discussion to answer questions. Also, please take 30 seconds after our webinar today to answer a short feedback survey. This includes the opportunity for you to share feedback with us, as well as to suggest topics for future webinars. Your feedback is very important to us, so 30 seconds is all that we ask. Now let's meet today's guests. Today we are joined by Denise Downer, an Emmy-nominated children's television animated writer based in Los Angeles. Denise is well known for credits including the Emmy-nominated Stillwater, Avengers: Black Panther's Quest, Marvel's Spider-Man, Power Rangers, DC Superhero Girls, Care Bears, Puppy Dog Pals, and Motown Magic. In addition to her television credits, she has also written for the children's graphic novel Tombstone, and she has a background including journalism and TV news, and she's also studied improv at UCB. Hopefully she brings us some laughs today. Currently, she is story editor for Tom and Jerry Time for Warner Brothers Animation. Also with us is Jen Ray, Director of Production at Titmouse. Born and raised in Southern California, Jen's love of animation began in her youth watching Saturday morning cartoons and Disney movies. Jen launched her career at Cartoon Network shortly after graduating from Cal State Fullerton with a BFA in Entertainment Art and Animation. She joined Titmouse in 2010 and has produced several popular series, including Turbo Fast, Son of Zorn, Venture Brothers, and Tigtone. And as Vice President and Head of Production for Titmouse Canada, she supervised all animation production while focusing on studio growth and management strategy. Also with us today is Kathi Carver, Vice President of Finance at Bento Box Entertainment. Kathi began her working life as a young age at her family's local weekly newspaper in Nebraska. She has continued doing a little bit of everything and problem solving ever since. Spending time in Nebraska, she helped to run her family's printing business and worked as an assignments editor and newscast director for the local news station. Through her career since relocating to California, she has held positions at Todd A.O. Glenn, Reeves Entertainment, Fox Broadcasting, Ticketmaster, and 19 Entertainment, known for American Idol and So You Think You Can Dance. She has spent the last 11 years at Bento Box in production finance, working on numerous animated projects, including Bob's Burgers, Duncanville, and Housebroken, and still problem solving. Also with us is Laney Ingram, Vice President of Business and Legal Affairs at Rooster Teeth Productions, where she heads the legal department, negotiating and papering all deals necessary for bringing animation, live action, and film production projects from idea to completion and distribution. Laney streamlines Rooster Teeth Company initiatives and processes for efficiency and partners with leaders across the organization to maximize operations while managing risks. She also founded and implemented the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. She is a former attorney for National Geographic, handling production, consumer licensing, compliance, and music deals. And she currently sits on the board of Women in Animation, a nonprofit dedicated to gender equity and diversity in animation. Also with us is Mandy Tankenson, Senior Vice President and Head of Production at Sony Pictures Imageworks, where she oversees all production activity, including recent releases Vivo, Mitchell's vs. the Machines, and Spider-Man: No Way Home. While at Imageworks, she has served as executive producer of CG Features, overseeing Sony Pictures Animation's Academy Award-winning Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. She has also held positions as producer, digital producer, and her first role at the organization, digital production manager for the Academy Award-nominated film The Polar Express. Prior to Imageworks, Mandy served as visual effects producer for Zoic Studios, Meteor Studios, and Centropolis Studios. And she is an active member of the PGA, the International Animated Film Association, and Women in Animation. Rounding out today's panel is Marge Dean, the president of Women in Animation. In addition to her role at WIA, Marge is an Emmy-winning producer, executive, and head of studio at Skybound Entertainment, where she is responsible for development and production of original animated content and establishing a new facility for the production of Skybound properties, including Invincible for Amazon. Known for building studios and animation pipelines, she was responsible for the design and redesign of several studios, including Columbia TriStar, Warner Brothers Animation, and Technicolor Animation, and Wildbraid Entertainment. She is former head of Crunchyroll Studios, the world's largest animation streaming platform. And since 2014, she and her fellow organizers at WIA have grown membership to nearly 5,000, establishing a world-class advocacy organization impacting the lives of creative women, transgendered, and non-binary people around the world. And finally, today's guest moderator is former producer and current vice president of business development and industry relations here at Entertainment Partners, Alexis Alexanian. Alexis hosts over 25 years of film and television experience as an independent producer and production executive. She is former president of production at Locomotive, known for Maggie's Plan and Look Away. She is former president, board of directors of the New York Women in Film and Television Organization. Currently, she serves on New York Women in Film and Television New York Advisory Board, BAFTA North America, and New York Production Alliance. She is co-founder of the groundbreaking digital initiative, Indigent, financed by IFC, and known for producing Sundance favorites, including Tadpole, Pieces of April, and Personal Velocity. Panelists, welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us this morning and this afternoon. It's so lovely to see you. Hello, Alexis. I'm going to pass things over to you. We have a lot to get to, so take it away.
Thank you, Natalie. The mellifluous Natalie Nelson. Thank you for those wonderful bios. So rich, so inspiring. I'm really pleased to be joined today by these experienced and very wise women in the field, representing some of the most prolific animators in the industry today. Since Natalie did give us a great snapshot of your career milestones, I thought we'd go around the room quickly and talk a little bit about how you got your start, a brief snapshot of how you started in the industry and cut to the role you play today. So I see Denise is on my right. Let's start with you, Denise.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Alexis. I started at a company called Klasky Chupo Animation back in the day, and I went in as a temp for the production department and ended up getting a job in the writing department as a writer's assistant, and just fell in love with animation. I was intrigued by the entire process and especially the writing because that's what I was interested in. So that's how I got my start, and it went from there.
Great. Laney, you're just below Denise in the Hollywood squares. So tell us a little bit about how you got your start and the role you play today.
Sure. I worked at a few entertainment companies before landing at Rooster Teeth in Austin, Texas. And when I landed at Rooster Teeth, they were embarking on a very large project called Genlock. It was their venture into very ambitious 3D animation. Previously, they had done 2D, and they were in the process of building a pipeline. I, for the last 4 years, have helped them develop the pipeline, close various deals, and we've gone from just Genlock to various other projects like Transformers and much more.
Amazing. Mandy, how about your entree into the world of animation and television production?
Sure. I actually got my start as a temp PA on Batman and Robin, the Joel Schumacher movie. I was lucky I got to work in the miniature effects department. So being around lots of people making little models of the sets, and it was endearing. They were wonderful people, really kind. And that kind of just launched me into sticking with it. Spent a lot of time in live action and then landed on Polar Express as my first animated piece, but really dug into animation on Arthur Christmas here at Imageworks. And so I have been here ever since. I've been probably every job in the pipeline as far as, production goes, and then landed in producing and now as an executive.
Kathi Carver.
Hi.
Tell us.
I started at Bento about 11 years ago, and I just got a call from a friend wanting to know if I knew any production accountants. And then, why don't you come work for me? So I had been working at 19 and we had been doing some live action stuff, but I came to Bento Box and started working with a lot of people that I worked with before. We have grown quite a bit. We were acquired by Fox last year. We're adding a whole lot of new divisions with a whole lot of implications for us. So that's how I got my start doing animation production finance.
And you're there to this day, watching it grow and change. Jen, how about you? What was your first job in animation? Oh, Jen, I think you need to unmute.
I'm muted. I first got into animation as part of my curriculum at Cal State Fullerton. My focus at the time was to become an animator. So the degree I was pursuing was entertainment arts and animation. And the requirement at the time was to do an internship at an animation studio. So I applied, and Nickelodeon was the first place that accepted my internship application. And I fell in love with interning, and I ended up doing 2 more internships at Cartoon Network. So after this 3rd internship total, that actually led to a PA job offering. And from there, I've just been working in production ever since. I was at Cartoon Network for about 5 years. And then in 2010, I came to work for Titmouse, where I've been for almost 11 years now. And I worked my way up to producer and then senior producer. And then in 2018, I was offered the opportunity to head our Vancouver animation studio. So I was there for almost 2.5 years. And then in 2020, largely sort of driven by the pandemic, I decided I wanted to be closer to family and return to LA, which is where I've been since as director of series production here in LA.
Thank you. We're gonna touch on the pandemic and its effects in all of our careers and in the workflow in a minute. But Marge, would you give us a little snapshot of how you got started and tell us a little bit about the origins of women in animation?
Okay. I also came into the entertainment industry through school. I was at the UCLA Producers Program, and in the course of that, I went to a students program at the Telluride Film Festival, and there I met Frank Marshall. And I asked him what he thought about producing animation. And at that time, which was the early 90s, he was very excited and then said, "Are you in LA?" And I was like, "Yes." And he said, "Call my office." And one thing led to another, and I ended up working on Family Dog as an intern, which then quickly became a PA position. And at that job, I made a bunch of relationships that with people I'm still connected with. One thing led to another. And my first big job once I graduated was being a PA on Ren and Stimpy. So it was a long time ago, but it was very fun. And then Women in Animation is an advocacy organization. It started in 1994. At that time, there were very few women in animation. And so I think the point of the group was just to bring people together and just for support and solidarity and all of that. And then in 2013, a small group of us, the then presidents or co-presidents of WIA, came to a group of us and said, "We need new leadership. We're tired," basically. So several of us agreed to form a board, and we just started building from there. Our focus, is advocacy. And the very first thing we thought we needed to do was figure out what is the landscape for women. And at that point in 2014, women were making up, 65, 70% of the student body of people studying animation, and yet only 20% of the creative workforce. And we specifically focus on the creative workforce because that's what we're trying to do, is to really facilitate getting female perspective and voices out there. And so that comes out more clearly through the creative roles. So, so once we realized this breakdown, that so many women were interested in working in animation and yet didn't end up doing that, we had a call to action of 50-50 by 2025. And our goal was to make the creative workforce 50% female. And what we figured out that we needed to do is, we first and foremost need to be advocates. We need to be the voice. We need to be, continually beating that drum and reminding people that this is something they need to think about, because it's really easy to not think about it. And, and then intersectionality became really critical after a few years. And we, then expanded it to, representation, working towards representation across the board. And we have programs that are really focus a lot on talent development. And so we have a very robust mentorship program. I mean, we mentor, I think at this point, we're probably at 600 to 700 women a year get the opportunity to be mentored. And we do it in the forms of mentoring circles, which means it's also these women all get to network with peers, which is really critical, as everybody here I'm sure can attest, is really critical to advancement in the industry. And we also created a database that is a resource to just, basically have no excuses when people are like, I'd love to hire women, but I don't know where to find them. Excellent. So we have a database now of over 5,000 names. And, so we're doing things like that. And the other big program we have and it's coming up, is at the Annecy Animation Festival. We do a whole day of programming, which is the Women in Animation World Summit. And every year we do it and, discuss what we figure or decide or notice is the big discourse that needs to happen. Again, it's just another form of advocacy.
No, it sounds wonderful and well needed, and it sounds like you've grown exponentially, since inception. And the reason we talk about people's, career starts is I think it's very inspiring to women and men, of course, anyone at any age, to see kind of, I like to invoke the Carole King of it all. My life is just a tapestry of rich and royal hue. You start in one direction and there are different colors and different threads, and I won't work the metaphor any longer. But back to Women in Animation, although it's a professional organization, there is an opportunity, as you mentioned, for mentorship. So for people who are at the early stages of their career, is there an opportunity to join? Or is there a prerequisite to?
No, and the one thing I would correct in what you said is we don't see ourselves as a professional organization. Okay. So you don't have to have anybody can join Women in Animation. You just have to believe in our mission and support our mission. So you don't even have to be in animation to support or participate in the programs that we have. And actually, I would say the biggest programs, or most of the people who take advantage of what we offer, are entry level folks, are students, and people in the first 3 years. And in fact, one of the things that we're trying to do as we move forward is to really build programs that will also support those mid-level folks who are hitting up against the glass ceiling, and try to figure out ways to help them break through or move up to the higher levels.
Of course, that's also essential for all of us. And I know we heard the number 11 a couple of times around here. So it looks like 11 may be the magic number in some of your cases, and of how long you've been there, and watching as your companies grow and expand due to the great desire for content and the audience's desire to consume more. Let's take a minute and talk about the pandemic and how we all sort of made it through that time. I know from my standpoint here at EP that we were all very pleased to see that animation was a consistent producer throughout 2020 and into 2021, when live action features and television seemed to be halted for a period of time and then quickly ramp up. So I just wondered how you would describe what your experiences were, both from, we have production on the phone, we have legal, we have finance, and I'd just love to hear, would anybody like to share a little bit about what happened in their particular company and under their purview during COVID? Anyone want to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in. We had quite a bit of recalibrating to do when COVID hit. Just as occurred with live action, for our animation teams, we had to shift the way we were producing, and we experienced delays in production. Once we got through those initial delays, we also had to figure out which parts of our pipeline could work remotely and what kinds of delays and servers needed to be set up in order for them to be effective and to transfer files at the correct rate to have the right type of resolution. So we had a lot of pivots to make. And as the legal and business affairs head, it meant that I had to have a lot of conversations with partners. Their expectations had to shift. And luckily, people were pretty understanding because they were all having to make big changes at the same time. The biggest issue for the legal business affairs production side was, we need you to cover some additional money because this budget is going to be a little bigger. It's going to take a little bit longer, but we got everything done.
What about COVID protocols, Laney, at that time? Were they, what was your workforce like? Were they working remotely anyway, or did you need to?
That's interesting because we had 3 active productions at the time, actually 4. 2 of them were overseas, and one was based in Japan. The other was at the time partially in France. And so as we tried to finish out production of Transformers and Tekken, Genlock, our own production, and Ruby, there was quite a bit to orchestrate. So for the productions that were abroad, it was already a remote workforce, but some of them also had offices, which led to delays because they were trying to figure out how to get their own workers back at their desks and get their artists plugged back into their computers. For the productions we control, we were able to set up a remote pipeline thanks to our tech team, who did yeoman's work, figured out how to expand our internet capabilities in order to allow our artists to deliver a lot of things and transfer models between each other remotely. Wow. So we shifted, and we shifted quickly, and it was a giant technical lift to do it. But for the productions we controlled, it happened a little faster. For our partners, we just asked for a little bit of time to allow them to get their protocols up, because different countries had different laws. And those different laws and rules and regulations were changing as everything was happening in real time, just as they did here in the States. One day it was 6 feet apart. The next day it was no one can come in the office. Someone tested positive. It was a constantly evolving situation.
You know, I think we all proved our agility, didn't we? Adaptability and agility through those times. I'm sorry, Marge.
That's okay. Just to add on to what Laney was saying, we had 2 productions, one in particular that we had our team in the US, and then we had a team in Japan, and then they were outsourcing to Korea and China. And so, there was basically 4 countries with protocols, and 4 countries in all different phases of the of the infection or the growth of the pandemic, and everybody addressing it differently, and so much of it out of our control. So it really, those were the challenges, I think, for sure, is that, if you are or were involved in, partnering with people, is just how much of that was out of your control.
Of course. Mandy, it looks like you.
I was going to say, I can add on to that too. We went from feeling like it might be a 2-week thing, right? I think everyone had that in their mindset. And at Imageworks, because we already work in 2 locations pretty specifically too, we've expanded out since the pandemic, but at the time it was really about us in Vancouver and Los Angeles, and the rules were changing, and they were always in Vancouver. The government rules were kind of changing just behind us in the US, but they were slightly different. We had that Herculean task. In about 5 days, we got everybody up and running at home, but then we had a lot to do making sure our production partners were okay with us sending everybody home to work, meaning, do we have an NDA that covers them while they're working out of their house? And what kind of security do we have to put into place to make sure that the IP is protected? And I think that was something that we were so nervous about, but yet everyone just came through so quickly with us. We were delivering a show right in May of 2020, and we walked into it really nervous, like, could we do this? Could we pull it off? And we didn't falter. We didn't miss a day, which was amazing. I think in total, all of our shows that year delivered just right on schedule as planned, which was a big effort from, of course, our production, partner side, and then Imageworks, that the artists were able to pull that off with the help of all the technology. So,
yeah, what do you attribute it to? What do you attribute the success through crisis to?
I think so much was what you just said a minute ago, is the ability to pivot and be really dynamic for us at Imageworks, because we have worked distanced from one another for so long. Often it'll be LA to Vancouver and then wherever our client is. We were very used to Google Meets. It was very common for us to, do that kind of meeting in general. Technology wise, those guys and gals worked absolutely around the clock for a several week period to make sure that everyone had a machine that could go home, that everyone had, a safety net in that machine. And that's how we pulled it off, was just being able to quickly move with really smart and really supportive people.
It's amazing. So it seems like the infrastructure was in place and there were certain protocols that you were used to already. And then just the sheer creativity and diligence, right? To get things done. I mean, speaking of that side of things, Denise, how was working as a writer, animator in during the pandemic for you? What was different for you?
Well, at the time when the pandemic first broke, I was working at Wild Canary, and I was a staff writer, assistant story editor there. And we were used to coming into the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week as a writing group. And we would come in to break stories and to brainstorm on outlines and drafts, and also to watch, watch the premiere of a finished product, and so there was a lot of camaraderie and collaboration, but at the same time, writers are used to working by themselves as well. So when the pandemic hit, we just, instead of coming in 3 days a week, of course, we were home 100% of the time, like everyone else. And we didn't miss a beat in how we were working. We still produced what we needed. And the main difference was not being together to brainstorm and to collaborate. So we had to do that virtually, and it worked out. But we were missing being together, because I think you get even more ideas when you're in close proximity to each other. And then now I'm on Tom and Jerry time at Warner Brothers Animation, and I'm story editor for Tom and Jerry time, and we're continuing with a virtual writer's room for breaking stories, and also meetings, and it's a great group that we have, and everything's been running really well without skipping a beat. So I think a lot of us, or not maybe a lot, but some people are back in the office. But as far as the writers, we are not. We're working virtually.
So you had some experience working on your own, but you see the benefits of the collaboration, and I imagine the immediacy, right? Even though we're all pretty good at doing this in how many dimensions is this? Only one? It's not quite the same, is it, as being in the room together? And I know, Jen, you have quite a lot of projects under your purview. How would you say that COVID coming, through the pandemic and out the other side, if we can say that, how has that been for you and all of your projects?
I would say, the focus in the immediate response was, employee safety and employee support, making sure that, we weren't sure if it was going to be a 2-week thing, and, how do you mobilize quickly and get these machines into the hands of the artists. By nature of the digital media that most animation is done in now, everyone does already work on a single computer setup, right? So the location change from the office to the home didn't quite change really much, I think, for most people. I think for many people it was a welcome change, whether it was... Marge mentioned earlier that saving time to commute, not having to commute. But what you lose in that is the separation of your work life and your home life. So there's always been this balance of a trade-off of, the what you get and what you gain from working from home. I think, again, from the basis of employee support and from that lens, trying to make sure that, the strain of working from home and the strain of kind of keeping up with these production schedules, trying to add and breathe in some air where it was possible while making sure our clients get what they need.
Right.
I think we all saw entertainment and animation in particular was a big resource for people during the pandemic. It was a place to escape. It was a place to work. And so now, this workforce is responsible for kind of keeping up the sanity for the industry as a whole. And so that takes its toll, right, on people's mental health. And so you, as management and leadership, you're trying to make sure that you're providing the support from all sides there, and not just trying to extract as much work as possible, but just make sure that you're facilitating normalcy as much as possible.
Right. As challenging as that could be. It's so interesting. I used to say things like, being in production, and just because you can, just because you're able, doesn't necessarily mean that's the best thing for you to just keep cranking out that type of work or working to that degree. It's also interesting when you talk about the workforce and management and healthy habits. And I have to say, as it's a panel of women, and we're appreciating women this month, that years ago, women in corporate America struggled to get one day at home, one day to work from home. So I'm shouting that out there, that here we are, and we're by and large working from home, and as capable, as prolific as before. I mean, just another, to just continue that pandemic conversation, or the COVID, rippling effects, Kathi, the financial ramifications of these extended schedules, or as Laney was saying, managing deal points, understanding, how we add room for unexpected or new challenges or safety protocols. What did you experience during COVID that perhaps is still in place to this day from a financial perspective? Is there anything there that you could share?
Yeah, sure. A lot of things have changed in how we have to manage the budgets that were set prior to COVID beginning, because animation, unlike live action, takes a lot longer. Most of the shows, we do series most of the time, or even a movie can take sometimes from a year and a half to 4 years to complete. So there's a lot of moving pieces that we had to reconfigure. You had to set up new technology, you had to pay for that, you had to find people to do it, you had to set up payroll solutions for people that were overseas, people that were working in different states because they moved somewhere because of COVID. You had to provide them with equipment and state types of guidelines, and adding sick benefits or paying a COVID stipend, and how you're going to work that into a budget. And if it was a work for hire project where someone else is funding it, are they willing to adjust? But you have savings in other areas just because people are not in office that can adjust towards that. But there were additional costs. So you had to go out and find out, is somebody willing to pay for that? And how much more do you need to provide to people if people didn't have at home enough high-speed internet and to get everyone so they could deliver it?
Are some of those are those still in place today? Do you feel that that's shifted, or do you feel like you still have COVID-related costs that you have to account for?
We still have some. I mean, we're just now starting where people deciding which part of the staff is coming back into the office. Are they going to be in a hybrid situation where they're coming in 2-3 days of work a week and working from home the rest of the week? Can we split the space? Because people still do want to be in the office at different times, maybe not full time. A lot of the artists want to stay at home, but a lot of the writers want to come in because of that collaborative effort. I mean, my team has been in the offices the whole time, which was great because we had office space, which of course we had to pay for, even though people weren't there. We just spread out and found different solutions. So yeah, there will be changes and it will stay, because I don't think that we will have everyone back in offices going forward. And that's going to mean trying to understand how to budget those things and make everything work.
It feels like we're ready for another shift, right? We're coming out of this, and yet again, we have to show some resilience, some flexibility, right? Figure out what works. And I think that we had mentioned this once before, the idea of what's essential, like how important is it for us to be in a room together? Where are the, let's talk about the ideal and the benefits of being in person. And I know probably, Denise, from your perspective, right, that you yearn for that, or, Jen and Mandy and Marge, in your purview, you want some of the people that you put together as producers or heads of production, right? You want to have that. Is there anything you're looking forward to? Is anybody sort of hopeful and excited about the new normal?
I'm very excited because we're also setting up a new facility. So there's that whole thing of, we're decorating and figuring out, where to put the furniture and all that kind of stuff. And so I love that kind of stuff, and as does my team. And our hope is, and I'm excited we have a team of people on Invincible that it's just a really lovely crew. We have, great people at the top that have brought in like just really energetic, creative, enthusiastic folks. And we're all trying to support them the best that we can. And, so I want to see their faces, other than on the screens. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm hoping, there are a handful of the folks don't live in the area. And so they'll probably, maybe we'll be lucky they'll visit once, but I'm excited to just physically be in a room with all these folks that, most of whom I haven't met yet in person.
Right. Well, speaking of that, I know that, go ahead, Mandy.
Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about how you have these diverse workforce, the international nature of your workforce and what you're used to. And will you meet some of those people who you work with internationally, or how does that intersect? But Mandy, tell us a little bit about how that.
Actually, that's great. Something we've been so lucky to do until the pandemic is although we were in multiple locations, we still did quite a bit of travel as executives on shows and the show leadership, creatives, et cetera. And my last trip out of the country was in February of 2020. And my next trip is in April of 2022. And I'm so excited to just be in the office where people are welcome to come in if they'd like. So for us, it's so much about, it is hybrid. It is looking at what is a collaborative moment that we want to come together for on each of our shows, or us as leadership, any of the other departments. It's just giving that opportunity. If people are comfortable and they're ready to come in, we're welcoming them. We're also being really aware of, it is a new normal, and you may have to take your dog to someone to come into the office now because you adopted a dog during the pandemic. Like, it's literally those kinds of things. Sony sent out this packet about ideas for return to office, and there's a whole chapter on helping your pets adapt, right? And these things that are so now important to us, pets, our family life balance is something that I think a lot of us have adjusted to. So I'm looking forward to those moments that people feel good about coming in, because it means they're ready for that collaboration in person. And for those who feel like they still need a little bit more time to do it from home, continuing to make this process that we're doing right now even better, right? Finding ways that a hybrid meeting it doesn't feel like you're the odd person out because you're the only one not in. Making that better. That's the stuff I'm really looking forward to kind of tackling.
There's a new concept in studios, which is hoteling.
That's what we call it too.
Yes. Yeah, everybody's calling it that, which I think
comes from corporate America, I think.
Yeah. I mean, but I love the idea, so that is sort of our approach, which I'd be interested in hearing what other folks, if they're doing a similar thing of we're setting up workstations basically, and people will come in and plug themselves in if they come into work, or they can. So try to give them that hybrid flexibility of, you could work in the office or you could just work at home, and you can go back and forth. So, but I don't know, it tickles me somehow, just this idea of hoteling.
Hoteling versus hot desking, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
It's hoteling
requires a whole new bag.
You and I both.
No,
here we go.
This is a hot
Do it
desk.
a third time.
Go ahead, Mandy, about the hot desk.
I think it's just that difference of we had some of the time you had a hot desk before where you just kind of literally walked up to any desk in the place. I mean, not literally because people were sitting on them, versus hoteling where you can plan ahead, right? You're thinking, okay, I'm going to come in. I'd like to reserve a seat on that date or these 3 dates in that week. And you pop it into an app and it's all set for you. I think it's amazing.
There's an app.
There are apps out there that will allow you to do this kind of organization. I'm totally drawing a blank on the name, but I will figure it out and remember it. But yes, it will work with your seating charts, and your artists or your people can just go online, pull up their thing and it book a desk. Like a hotel.
We're getting close to time, unfortunately, and I feel like this could be one in a series because we're just touching the surface of all there is to discuss in animation. And I know that we diversity and women in the space, these are the not so new issues that, of course, are part of a zeitgeist that we are all wrapped up in. And I wanted to hear from each of you what efforts you're making or your companies are making, or what shifts you've seen in that regard. And also touch on Marge's goal of 50-50 and did you say 2023, Marge? Or did you say
I wish. 2025? We need a couple more years. It's 2025.
But I'm just curious, it's such a powerful medium, such a versatile medium. What's happening in your world that you can share? I don't know, Jen, we haven't heard from you in a minute. So, and plus there was an animal tale in the frame before when Mandy was talking about pets.
That's George Clooney.
Can you cue?
That's George Clooney, and he's being very lazy, and apparently he nestles on the couch, so apparently he knows I'm doing a rare
Sorry,
panel.
real George. Just diverse voices, diverse hiring practices, anything interesting that you'd like to, or observations that you've made, shifts that you've witnessed.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I one thing I love about Titmouse is they've always had just an open door policy. I mean, I felt like they were always, independent, of other sort of mainstream, corporate places. And this is me talking as a 21-year-old or however old I was when I first joined them, 25, 26. And I love that they were this artist-run, company, and holding on to that idea where it's sort of, artist advocacy is a very big deal for them. I think from a content perspective, we are in a moment, right, where the intersection of all of these things, the pandemic sort of really elevating animation to be one of the most sought after forms of media and kind of one of the only producible things, certainly in the height of the pandemic, because we couldn't do physical production. And so this demand for content, I think, is meeting these moments of where we want different voices, we want different stories. And so I'm excited to see that I'm seeing a lot more female-centric shows being developed, or diverse, stories being told from different lenses, and that there is a demand for it. So I think that the supply is coming to meet that, and also the sources of that supply, stories and women focus stories and LGBTQ, like our show Q Force, sort of was one of the first LGBTQ animated series that we had produced out of Canada, in fact. So yeah, I think that we are in a moment where there's a demand. More animation in particular is high in demand. They want diverse stories. There's an appetite now for diverse stories, and so I'm excited to, and I think our ability to kind of work with several clients to have such a wide spectrum of that is really exciting.
And I like to add that I'm also finding it very exciting, and Warner Brothers Animation is answering that call as well for diversity, cultural diversity, from their shows such as DC or Looney Tunes or, Scooby-Doo. They're all trying to look at how to reflect the cultural landscape that we're all in. And so that I'm excited to see what's happening. For instance, on Bat Wheels, we have the first African-American character who's going to wear the Robin suit. And we have another show called The Adventures with Superman, and Lois Lane will be Asian. So I see changes being made, and I think it's very exciting to see that, and also work on shows that are similar. The show that I'm on, Tom and Jerry Time, there's always been this iconic duo that's been locked in like an aggressive rivalry, and the rivalry is still there. It's just different because it's for preschool audience, and I think that's just inspiring that we can take these characters and bring them into the preschool space. So we're doing a lot of things differently and positively.
If we have one more minute, I'm really passionate about this topic. Rooster Teeth is in a unique position because not only do we create animation, but we're aligned with the gaming space. So Jen touched on it being a moment. Wow, was it a moment in 2020? The world exploded, George Floyd happened, gaming was in a really negative space in terms of its culture. Women were dropping out of the workforce, trying to take care of kids in the middle of the madness with no school. And I'm really proud of the way that Rooster Teeth responded in saying, we want to make this a place that's welcoming for everyone. And I think the pandemic allowed us to look not just at people as roles, or you're not the accountant, you're not the animator, you're not the modeler, you're a person. And you're probably going through a lot to arrive at your desk to do the work each day. What can we do to set you up to succeed? How can we listen to what obstacles you had between you and sitting down at your keyboard in order for people to show up with more of themselves, so they could imbue that into the work, so that we can get more representation within the projects we're making.
And I know that we've also been doing other projects. They started a blockchain creative labs where they are working with NFTs, and some of it's related to the animation and doing some projects with that. There's other things that they're doing as well. So they're trying to put that together and figure out how we can use the artists to do that. In A Studio, they're asking people to come up with TikTok videos and do things to try and develop new talent and give them the opportunity to create a show from, the artwork that they submit. They have an art school that they're doing. So there is a lot of progress that needs to be made over time that I've worked there. I mean, I can see that there's still a lot of room to be done. There needs to be a lot of ceilings broken. And I've heard things during my years that are very discouraging. So I'm really hopeful, as women, we can actually make a difference and start getting some stuff that's creatively done by women and driven by women. Because even some of our shows, I'm glad that people come in and say, hey, why do you have women being voiced by men? Diversity. Yes. I mean, and I like that they do that. I brought those questions up myself. So I'm hoping that everything starts to change so that we can have a bigger voice and that our content is seen.
Of course. Any final thoughts before we go to a few questions? I know we need to wrap it up soon.
I wanted to answer that other question as well. One of the things that I'm really inspired with or about is just how many programs there are throughout the industry. Like pretty much every studio has set up some sort of training program or writers program, or, that is specifically geared towards underrepresented people. And I just think it's exciting. Like we just compiled a list of all these programs, and it's very long, so there's a lot of opportunity out there that didn't exist before. And I'm hoping that folks, and the folks who are listening to this are finding out about them and going for them and trying to get into the programs, because this is just, again, an opportunity that didn't previously exist in the industry. So like before it was, and many of those programs are trying to help people sort of by step the entry, like previously the entry into the animation industry was through art school. And art school is super expensive because most of them are private schools. And so that just cuts out a whole population of people who can't afford, spending $100,000 a year or $75,000 a year to go to art school. And so that's what's awesome about these programs, is that does open the doors for other people, besides those few people that can afford to go to art school.
Fantastic. We will take a couple of minutes. Like I said, we just scraped the surface. There's so much more to talk about. I may have to wrangle you all back in a couple of months to continue the conversation. But Natalie, do we have a couple of questions that we'd like to address before we close out?
Yes, we do. And the first one, since we've been talking about programs, we had someone write in and just want to confirm when joining Women in Animation, this audience member is living in the Yukon in a remote territory near northeastern Alaska, and just wants to know, are they able to join Women in Animation? Are there any limitations geographically or otherwise?
Absolutely not. And this was one of the big benefits of the pandemic, is that we had been talking for the longest time about building a virtual community, and essentially the pandemic forced our hand and made us move quicker than we were moving. And so now we have lots and lots of programs that are accessible and virtual, including the mentorship program. It is possible to be in that, virtually or through the, not in person. So.
Great. Thank you. We had a couple questions come in about technology and innovation. And I know, Kathi, you just mentioned NFTs, which was mentioned in these questions. So I'm going to make this maybe a two-part question. But with all of the emerging technology, if it's Unreal Engine or graphics cards or VR sets or NFTs, how do you see the marriage of animation and all of these technologies? And what would you like to see that look like going forward? And as a second part of the question, are there any skills or software that you see as important with keeping up with the industry and kind of staying ahead of what's happening?
I can jump in with my 2 cents on that, which is for animation in general, I find that the trends are the software is always going to change, especially when we look at the translation from, cell animation to digital. But I think the core foundational skills never change. So I kind of use the metaphor of it doesn't matter what type of pencil you're holding, you still need to be able to use that tool, whether it's a digital pencil like Harmony or newer ones like Blender. I am finding more of a marriage between 3D software and 2D, helping one another, not just so much as the media that you are producing the story in, but just, using Blender as a way to, manipulate your camera and get angles if you're going to draw a 2D aspect. Or of course, leaning fully into the CG pipeline and learning those softwares too. And to me, I think the difference between being a draftsman or an animator versus being a technician, can you manipulate these pieces of software or can you draw and create with them? And I think finding the balance is sort of the mandate for everyone in terms of what type of artists they want to be. But for particularly for a lot of the series we produce here, and whether we outsource it or not, there is such a spectrum of software available that we never hone in really on. You must know this software in order to get a job here, because it's just simply not true. There's a lot of opportunities and I think innovation too. I think that's where innovation is bred, where I didn't know you could use the software this way to make this thing this way. So we don't want to close the door, I think, on that either.
I want to also make a pitch for soft skills as the less technical person who is in the world of words and negotiation. Soft skills are very important if you have the chance in your education to be exposed to travel, to be able to learn another language, to be able to take some classes on negotiation or public speaking, so you're less uncomfortable when you have to raise your hand in a situation or speak up in a team meeting. All of that's actually very helpful, particularly when you're breaking in to a job and you have to go into a job interview and you're already nervous. I just want to mention that because we have such an international industry now.
I think that's so great. I just have to add that that's something I was going to mention, Laney. I'm so glad you said it, because those are the things that you sometimes you only learn by experience, right? So if you can seek it out a little bit more and through travel, through exposure to other people, I think it brings a lot to what you bring to any company you're going to look at.
I would add being a production assistant too, because I think that when you are in a low level and you get to see how all of the parts fit together and the demands of each department or the priorities of each department and the personalities involved, I think that that's an amazing education too, to understand, as well as finance, being in an accounting department and seeing where the money goes and how it's spent is also another amazing, perspective on why and how things come together.
Well, and I could say too, I went to school for music and art. I never took an accounting class in my life. I'm just right brain, left brain, right? So because I can do those things and, I'm willing to put in the work and understand it, do the extra research, go the extra mile, then it's led into a whole different type of career. Was it where I wanted to go? Maybe not, but it's also a learning experience along the way. And then whatever you take, I worked at a post house, I worked at live action, I worked at a studio, I worked in TV news where I directed newscasts. I went to school at Berklee College of Music and was a production major. So I'm all of those skills help me do what I do now and be successful at it. And that's what I look in everyone is can you solve a problem? Because everything's moving all the time and you have to find the resources to solve the problem.
Absolutely right. Marge, how about a final thought?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with what everyone is saying, but all that being said, I think for a lot of people, there are cycles of labor shortages. And, right now I personally am desperate for a production accountant. So if anybody has any recommendations, please let me know. But
we do have a resume. We do have a resume resource at EP.
Yeah, we've been tapping.
We can. Yeah. Oh, you have. Okay.
Yeah,
we can discuss later. Okay.
Anyway, but putting that aside, going back to the folks that I was talking about before, people who don't necessarily have access through the normal channels to the entertainment industry. Being able to learn a skill such as real-time rendering or, Photoshop or After Effects or being, skilled at a tool, could open a door. Women in Animation is creating an alternative pathway program with Hollywood High, which basically the training is going to be to train them to do basic VFX. I think it will be using After Effects and also to train them in it's underwritten by Epic. So it's going to be, getting them to be familiar with real-time rendering. And then part of the program is then placing them in studios, to be able to work. And that's a very direct approach to get that door open. And that really is the first biggest hurdle, is to get the door open for, different kinds of people that don't normally get those opportunities. So there is something
Wonderful.
Really important about learning basic, software skills as well. That could really make a difference.
Yeah. software and lots of other things. I want to thank you. I know we have to wrap it up. We've come to the end of our time period here. And like I said, I may have to wrangle you again in a couple of months to continue the conversation. Bon courage, as they say. Keep doing all the amazing work that you're doing, because we're all out here benefiting and enjoying and being entertained. So thank you all, and we hope to see you again soon. Natalie, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I know a couple of you have to go, so thank you for spending your time with us this morning. And thank you to all of our participants who joined today's discussion, submitted questions. We did have quite a few questions that we could not get to. So if we didn't get to your question, or if you think of something outside of today's webinar, please know that you can head over to the production community. We do have a forum where you can post questions for experts, and we'll post some Q&A from today's webinar. And we encourage you to make those connections and keep the discussion going with us at the production community. We will also make a recording of today's webinar available on the EP website at ep.com/masterseries. You'll find a recording so you can visit today's webinar along with our entire library of master series. We have over 60 episodes available on demand anytime for viewing, and this is related to industry and product news, COVID-19, incentives, payroll, legislation, and many other topics. So we encourage you to visit us at ep.com/masterseries, and we also encourage you to visit the blog, where we have articles that are written about the latest entertainment news, expert advice, analysis on issues, and we do feature industry experts like the panelists who joined us today. So please join us and take advantage of all of the resources that we are making available at ep.com. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. We hope that you all stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Master Series.